me through this. iPhone sales missed estimates, services missed estimates, the forecast beat. What about all of these other indicators?
Well, it's a really interesting report because if you would have told me they would have missed on both services and iPhone revenue, I would have said there was no way they were going to beat on top and bottom line. But as you mentioned, wearables, $5.53 billion, that was a big plus. They also used about $21 billion of cash on the quarter to repurchase shares and increase the dividend. I think they kept it at 77 cents. So they did some other things to kind of help along, which would initially you would have thought would have been somewhat of a tough quarter for them, at least based on the fact they missed estimates on iPhone revenues and also services.
Still, we've got the president warning the trade war is not going to get better anytime soon. That could directly impact the iPhone Max.
Yeah.
If tariffs come into play on the iPhone, what does Apple do?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is for years, Apple's been kind of counting on global expansion, selling lots and lots of smartphones in China, and it's been able to do that to some extent, but you know, as we're seeing, the numbers just aren't there, and the outlook isn't great because you have, as you said, the possibility of tariffs, you know, further sort of barriers. Also, you know, these Chinese companies are going to be pushing harder and harder in their, you know, in the domestic market in China, you know, at the same time that Apple's trying to get in there. There's, you know, potentially government helping those companies along. So you know, lots of, you know, quote unquote headwinds for Apple. I think the good news here, though, the services thing, even though it's not, you know, exactly where they'd like it, it's still very strong. I mean, it's pretty amazing. We're at a place where iPhone revenue, this has basically been an iPhone company for years, is now below half of Apple's revenue, which you could look at as a bad sign, but, you know, it's probably a good sign because we've heard Tim Cook over and over again say that they want to increase services revenue, and here it's happening. So that's good news for investors.
Well, the earnings call has begun. Apple CEO Tim Cook speaking right now, saying he's thrilled to report a return to growth. Dan, you own a couple 100,000 shares of Apple. How concerned are you about this tariff issue?
Well, the tariff issue, as Max was saying, I mean, it's kind of a double whammy in regards to obviously shipping the phones that are assembled in China back to the U.S. with the Trump administration. Then you have retaliatory tariffs in regards to certain things like glass covers and retina eye sensors that are actually shipped into China that could be potentially on a tariff watch with the Chinese government. And the big question going forward, and maybe Max can talk a little bit about it too, is just what does Apple do? Do they try to raise prices, which they already have extremely high average selling prices compared to their competition, or do they just absorb the tariff into their profit margins? And, you know, how does that work into like this international expansion theme where you have annual average incomes in countries like India and China that are a fraction of what they are here in the U.S. So it does create a conundrum for Apple going forward. So it is definitely an issue in terms of trying to kind of model out what's going to happen with Apple with these tariffs.
Meantime, they want to push the services business. They still hit a record in the services business, though lighter than what some analysts had estimated. But in order for the services business to grow, they have to keep getting new devices into the hands of customers, right?
Yeah. In the Bloomberg blog, you know, Mark Gurman pointed this out, that it's kind of this circular thing where on one hand services are replacing iPhone sales, on the other hand you can't have services, as you say, without more iPhones. And I think, you know, there is some question: is Apple making all this money in services revenue because their services are really good, or are they making it because they've kind of set up this business where you kind of have no choice? I mean, if you have an iPhone and you want to buy an app, you know, that's revenue in Apple's pocket. That's recurring revenue that's never going to go away, or not going to go away for a really long time. And so it's hard to know, you know, is what we're seeing in terms of a revenue growth, is this real innovation, or is this, you know, more like a very powerful, mature company kind of flexing its muscle and collecting revenue? And I think depending on what you think the answer to that question is kind of how you're going to value the stock. Because if you see lots and lots of growth ahead, then you're going to be much more optimistic.